We have a bunch of game changers up here, and they are definitely bigwigs in the industry, and because they're so well known already, we decided to introduce them by something a little bit more personal rather than going through a long resume of accomplishments. So our first game changer does motorcycle racing, does Formula One car racing, does NASCAR racing, which is skiing, and when not going for the fast life, also plays golf and plays with trash. So please welcome Steve Vinny. Our next game changer has fallen out of bed before and given herself a concussion. Apparently has difficulty with our Washington, D.C. metro system, which I don't understand. And you'll have to ask her about this later on, has shopped for hazardous chemicals and smoked a hookah while in Amman, Jordan. Please welcome Sarah Bixby. Our next game changer is married and has a 1-year-old baby and has recently worked on a community manure digester project. His favorite sports include wrestling and pickleball. And these are my favorite. Has once won a hot dog eating contest and can hold his breath for over 2.5 minutes. Please welcome John Welch. Our next game changer is a recent grandfather and is the president of the Friends of the Dover Library and has been instrumental in getting a new library built. Please welcome N.C. Vasuki. Our next game changer is the vice president of his local wine club. One of his hobbies includes agility and frisbee training with his 2 Australian shepherds. And both he and his wife have had careers as professional painters. However, his was painting houses. Please welcome Jim Warner. Our next game changer ran track and field in college, and as a child started her neighborhood recycling program, collecting cans and bottles in a wagon, taking them to the grocery store and redeeming them for their 5 cents, keeping the profits. And then last year, she rode her bike with 10,000 other people in Ragbray, I'm not sure what that is, a 6-day bike ride across the state of Iowa. Please welcome Olivia Williams. And our final game changer this morning is somebody that has been involved in solid waste management a lot and decided as a result of his experience that he did not have a tremendous fondness for local public elected officials. And now he is one. Please welcome Laney Hickman. So, if they get seated, we will get started. I assume this down button. Oops. I go like, okay. So we've gone through our panel of game changers. I will start off by saying the format we're going to choose. If you have questions, we have put at the end of each aisle There are 3x5 cards. Please write any questions you have on those 3x5 cards, and we will try and take some time. The volunteers, hopefully there's some volunteers, we'll bring them up, and I will read the best ones. Okay, so our topic today is going from managing waste to managing resources. And somebody else used this cartoon, but I liked it, so I stole it from them. So we have a paradigm shift. And we're going to start off our audience with a couple of our Game Changers panel with a couple of questions. With a management shift in resources, how have the management shift affected those of us on the panels, and what is driving this shift, and how does your organization play into it? And I will start off, Steve, and the rest of the panelists are given carte blanche to interrupt and argue with Steve as he tries to make a case.
All right, how have I been affected from the shift in managing waste to managing resources? I'd say, first of all, people don't think I'm crazy anymore. We started in 1990. I was in the landfill business, and I would see the compactor operators grabbing aluminum screen doors and metal and wire, and they would sell it and make great profit, each of them, by the end of the year. And then you started to look at office buildings that we managed, and almost everything in the waste stream was what I would deem a recyclable. It's paper, cardboard, aluminum cans, and so we started into looking at the waste stream for recyclables, and we created Dirty MRFs, and then eventually our first Dirty MRF went online in 1993. Our first single stream MRF went online in 1998, and it's just very interesting that yesterday we heard conversion technology people talk about how we need front-end processing before our conversion technology, and you see this giant movement now towards single-stream MRFs. And I think it's very exciting and very interesting, and I really expect we'll see a lot more of it.
I think that's really exciting, and but what about like smaller regions? What about the more rural areas? I mean, Sarah, you're coming from someplace that's more rural. How is it affecting you? Do you agree with what Steve's saying? Clearly, yes.
That would be a first.
Yeah.
I do agree with what Steve's saying, but I also know that in more rural areas, we still struggle sometimes just to get people to manage waste correctly. And so the shift from managing waste to managing resources, in a lot of ways, makes me feel like we are falling farther behind because we haven't yet caught up to the curve, and now the curve is going away from us again. And so we have a lot of progress still that needs to be made.
Lanny, do you find being on the East Coast that's similar?
Yeah, I've always thought that it wasn't an issue of we knew what the waste was and what was in it. It was where was the markets, and I've always felt like we've never attacked the markets. I mean, somebody builds a car, they don't just put it out there. They start to sell a car with marketing, and I think that's probably been the biggest problem with us making this shift over to managing resources rather than burying solid waste. And I still see no vision or no emphasis on our field trying to get the markets to open up. This economy, it's the economy, stupid, and our markets disappeared for a lot of the products that we were pulling out of the waste stream because we didn't build markets at home.
I think the people that are hardest hit by the... Oh, NC, please.
Well, the important thing is there's a connection between what we use and the energy required for materials we use. When the energy prices were very low, really it didn't matter what we threw in and what we did with it. As the energy prices started moving up, particularly after the 1972 embargo, all of a sudden we started noticing that there was value in recovering materials just from the energy use viewpoint. So as long as the energy prices keep creeping up, there is greater opportunity for materials recovery. The problem is, as Lanny pointed out, the markets dictate what is needed, when and where and at what price, not the government.
You know, I think, speaking of the 1972 embargo, I think we have a couple people that weren't born in 1972 up here, and I'd like to hear, you know, them take not such a long view.
Thank you.
Nothing really good. I actually think they're the group that's probably been hardest hit by the economy. So, if John, Olivia.
Sure. Sorry, I've been losing my voice the last couple of days. Absolutely, I think as you look to the future, it's going to be market-driven, and energy prices are only going to go up. But another piece that we see maybe from our generation is it's also driven by what our customers and the public want. So the public is demanding that we are recovering these resources, and now we need to find a way to make that mesh with what the current markets are.
I would absolutely echo that sometimes the market doesn't matter when your customers are really pushing you to go a certain direction. So it becomes our job to help educate the public so that they can understand some of the challenges that our clients are up against in trying to strike that balance between doing what the customer wants and then, you know, making it a profitable or at least a break-even industry.
You know, this. Go ahead.
Don't we also have a problem in that there's a perception that waste is kind of a dirty energy? Recycling is somehow perceived as better, it's green, it's preferred, and even though we talk a great deal about alternative energy, waste is really not the thing that people want us to burn as an alternative energy source.
Jim's got it to respond to that.
Look, I think what's driving the shift, if you look at the question, what's driving the shift, is technology development. You know, where would we be in recycling if we hadn't developed from totally source separation to single stream? You know, single stream's taken over. Why? What's made that available to happen? It's technology. Industry is extremely innovative, and we keep driving efficiencies into this industry. What's enabled us to create energy, whether it be mass burn as we know it, or landfill gas, is technology to capture gas and efficiently burn it in developed IC engines that can make electricity, or efficiencies to pull 600 kilowatt hours out of a ton of waste via a mass burn plant and do it cost effectively. So whether it's recycling, whether it's recovery of energy through the gas or through the combustion of the waste itself, it's really technology that continues to drive our ability to capture resources, whether they be the materials themselves or the energy inherent in those materials.
Jim, if I may, Lanny talked about markets, and I think really the driver is the market, and the technology is the means by which we extract it. Just a quick poll here, just stand up. How many people would like to earn an extra $1 billion annually? If you would, just stand up for a minute. Nobody? Personally, I'd like an extra $1 billion. There's $1 billion.
I'm glad that you've earned your first $1 billion, Steve. We're still waiting on ours.
There's $1 billion a year worth of aluminum cans that's still buried in landfills. Every single year, after curbside recycling is still occurring, there's still $1 billion worth of aluminum cans left that's buried in landfills. Forget about paper, metal, plastics, just aluminum cans, $1 billion in landfills. So the world's largest manufacturer of aluminum roll products, a company called Novelis, prompted me and they said, Steve, can you design a MRF for us to get those cans because we want them? And that's exactly what we did. And the bottom line is that, you know, when you look at technology, whether it's single stream MRF or dirty MRF, I mean, the reality is the technology is so advanced today between screening technologies and near infrared technologies and X-ray and eddy current. You can have a MRF today that can process single stream recyclables or a dirty MRF, just raw trash, and with a 3 to 5 man crew, you can have a totally automated MRF. And, you know, we've got 120 million tons of waste that still ends up in a landfill. And the reality is the technology is there today to extract valuable materials in a cost-effective way and put that back in the marketplace. That creates jobs here.
Not to worry, Steve. If you're putting 120 million tons in the landfill, look at it as a future resource.
That's right.
We can mine the landfills and get your $1 billion worth of aluminum cans when the right time comes. So I think I see mining landfills in the future as a definite technology and something worth we should look for. And if we are intelligent enough, when we landfill, we can also separate materials, put those materials which have no market value now in separate cells so we can recover them in the future. Right now, we put everything and stomp it and cover it, but we can do better things than that.
Well, I think the market's here. The game change is the technology.
No, the people are the game changers. If we don't attach the people, if we don't pull them into the system, the technologies aren't worth anything. You can't get the material there. We talked at breakfast in India and in many other countries that waste going to the landfill never actually gets tipped at the landfill face because people are pulling it away. And I'm not saying that's a system that we should necessarily aspire to, but the waste should never go to a processing facility. It should go back to something long before we get to a landfill, at least in the opinion of most of the rest of the world.
Yeah, but you see, the reason why materials are pulled off in places like India is because there's no alternative employment. I'll give you an example. Taiwan, about 30 years ago, had a lot of problems with solid waste, and there were a huge number of people who were picking stuff from solid waste to make a living. But as Taiwan's economy improved, better paying jobs became available, and these same people who were relying on picking stuff from the garbage decided that they would go work somewhere else. And then all of a sudden, Taiwan had a problem with a lot more solid waste than they had ever anticipated. But then they were able to figure out that we can dispose the solid waste properly. So there's a step in each one where the income level, if the wealth increases, then all of a sudden environmental quality becomes an issue. As Sandra pointed out, if you're getting less than $1,000 a year income, environment is not your concern. It's getting food on the table and roof and clothing. But if you had $4,000 a year income, all of a sudden you've got a little more things to think about and the environment becomes an issue. So this is why, while globalization is not accepted very easily, it's globalization which is increasing the wealth in some of these countries.
Yeah, I think, the realization is that unless we get extended producer responsibility for every product in the next 10 years, we're still going to have a waste stream. So that's the reality we live in. And you're right, we can take all that waste and make a beneficial use out of it. If you throw enough money at anything, you can do it. But the markets and the technology have to get to that point first. And so that's where everyone in this room, we need to get the technology there to meet what the current markets are.
What I think is really interesting about this whole discussion is that compared to maybe what it was in 1996 with Subtitle D, it's not being driven by regulations anymore. This is now being driven by demand. People want to be more sustainable. People want to be greener. So this perhaps now more than ever is going to be when the fastest learning curve is happening, because we really have to keep up with the demands and really be out at the front of
But let me ask you
changes.
this question. Are people willing to pay more?
I think that depends a lot on where you live. I'm out in Seattle, and in the Northwest and on the West Coast, I would absolutely say yes. Perhaps in other areas of the country, that's not the case.
So if it's the public making the demand, what about all the rural areas? Do they not care?
Well, I used to say, and I still believe it, that solid waste management problems are the problems of the wealthy. The poor folks don't have solid waste management problems. $1,000 a year, I agree with it, with NC. You know, the food on the table comes before, and they don't generate the trash. But if you take 100 tons of municipal solid waste and you do all the magic things that we do with it, and then we haul what we don't want off to the sanitary landfill, that 15 to 18 or 20% has a lot of BTUs in it, and it's going in the wrong place. It's going in the wrong place. But how many waste energy plants, municipal solid waste energy plants, have we cited, permitted, and put on stream, new ones, in the last 20 years?
Well, Jim should know.
Not enough.
If any.
What's that?
I said, not enough.
Right,
I agree.
not enough. And, you know, that's kind of been in our little, you know, neck of the woods in Lancaster County, Pennsylvania. You know, our resource management really came about because of land. You know, waste management is also a land consumption issue, especially in Mid-Atlantic, Northeast, and other highly populated areas. And that's why in Europe, you know, you don't see long-haul waste. You know, they look at it as a resource. They need energy. They didn't have land for landfills, so they've been way ahead of us here in North America by developing waste to energy in various forms in order to help support their energy needs within their urban cores. You know, we've only done that sporadically where we have urban areas and really didn't have the political will to site landfills. Therefore, you know, we either create energy out of it and minimize that landfill footprint, or those communities long haul, which, you know, we know from a energy balance standpoint is a terrible decision. You know, not to belabor New York City, but if you look at an urban area that is a large consumer of energy, but they also are creating 20, 30,000 tons of fuel every day. And what are they doing with it? They're using additional fuel, spewing fumes through combustion of diesel by long hauling it up and down the East Coast. You know, it's not, that type of actions are not sustainable waste management, and unfortunately it's happening in more and more of our communities.
It's a political will that's not there to make the hard decisions.
And you know, I don't care if we recycle 40% as in our community, 50%, 60%. You know, I just think we need to get away, and as we are, from landfilling resources, because we're doing way too much of it in this country when you look at other westernized countries in this world.
Yeah, but you see, one of the problem which we miss is while we separate and do all that, who is the biggest beneficiary of this process? It's China, not the United States. So we're very happy to separate this and ship it to China and say, oh, we've done our job. Really, if you look at from a resource management viewpoint, we're sending low-value waste products to China and then importing high-value products from China. If we were smart, we would process the material here and sell them the high-value fiber to China, plastics to China after refining, rather than shipping everything there and creating jobs there.
And see, that's half of the issue. Let me show you the other half of the side of the coin. One of the largest manufacturers of 100% recycled paperboard in the United States, they can simply not get enough mixed paper. When I started waste processing in 1993, there was no commodity called mixed paper. Now it's an official board market indexed commodity. And number 8 news, which is the highest quality news, is rapidly disappearing. And bottom line is there's a huge demand for cardboard. And what they use a lot of mixed fiber for is for that fluted sheet in the center between the inner and outer layer of cardboard. And people are buying more and more things on the internet. People have more and more electronic subscriptions, so there's a reduced amount of newspaper and junk mail. And so bottom line is, number 8 news is starting to disappear, and mixed news, mixed paper is starting to really diminish. And so these manufacturers here in the United States have said, you know, we've got to get more mixed paper. So they run the price up with the idea that if we increase the price, more people will want to recycle. And they find that it had no effect. It's purely inelastic. Price is inelastic as far as quantity. So now they have to dig deeper and try to get mixed paper out of the waste stream. They want to buy it. There's a market here for it. And the ceiling price for the value of mixed paper is really the value of ground wood, because there's plenty of wood in the forest. And the bottom line is, if the mills in the United States cannot get enough mixed paper, they're going to go and retool back to ground wood. And that'll be a collapse of our recycling market. So it's very important that we look for ways to get more and more mixed fiber. It's in high demand here in the United States. It creates jobs in the United States, and it is being made in the United States.
Yeah, but Steve, the newspapers are diminishing and disappearing. The books are disappearing. We got the e-books, and if you look at I look at my solid waste, and hell, all I'm throwing away now is plastic bottles. That's what's going to the recycling. There's no more paper. Cardboard's disappeared. I would not buy futures in waste paper processing plants.
We're still always going to have paper, and over 50% of the paper today, even with curbside recycling, still ends up in a landfill.
So have we changed our paradigm then? If the mills want product, if they can't get enough mixed paper, if they know that pricing is not a driver in their recovery, have we reached a point where we should see a shift in that the mills and the producers are setting up the recovery systems for the product, and the public sector is stepping away from being the provider of the collection infrastructure? And I'm not necessarily advocating for that, so nobody please shoot me.
That's occurring.
We need to think about it.
That is occurring in the absence of us as waste professionals providing them the meaningful volume. I can tell you that Pratt Industries, for example, because the waste industry hasn't stepped up fast enough to get them the materials they want, they are out right now building commercial MRFs to take, the sweet waste, the commercial sector waste, to extract paper. And they don't really want to do it. They really don't want to be in the processing business. They're doing it because there aren't enough of us stepping up to do it. So there's opportunity out there.
And that would represent a shift in how we pay, not necessarily new costs. There are a lot of things that the public sector could do in terms of serving residents and citizens that aren't necessarily tied to waste collection or waste disposal.
Yeah, we're forgetting one other factor. The waste characteristics keep changing. As Lanny pointed out, the newspaper business is going downhill, so getting lots of clean newspaper is a downward curve. There's also another factor, and as a recent grandfather, I can vouch for it. There's a huge demand for diapers in the developing world. And to make the diapers, they need special quality fibers, one of which is long stable fiber from office paper, which is a high quality long staple fiber, and that demand is driving more and more material into the diaper market than the paper market. So what happens to the diaper at the other end? Well, it ends up in a landfill or a dump someplace. So the waste characteristics keep changing, and part of our problem is in our regulatory structure. We assume a certain waste characteristic on a given day, and we think it'll be there 10 years from now, and design all these systems, then find out 10 years later it's not there. I'll give you a practical example. We built a dirty MRF in Delaware in the 1980s. Glass content of Delaware waste was around 12 to 14%. So we built a glass recovery plant thinking it'd be there. Well, the Delaware passed a bottle bill, and guess what? Overnight, our glass content dropped from 12 to 14% to less than 6%. and now it's probably down to 4%. So the glass system we built, thinking glass will be there, could no longer be used. So we got to design these systems with much greater flexibility than ever before, because the waste characteristics will change in the future.
Is that, when we think about some of the technologies that are coming, do you think the technologies are prepared to accept that level of flexibility? I think that's one of the advantages of a mass burn or a landfill. But what about the other technologies that are coming down the pike?
I think the answer is yes to all of the above. There's not other than the landfill, there's not another solution that has the capability of handling everything. And NC, I think discussion about dirty diapers clearly hits below the belt.
I think that's true, and I think we're going to have to continue to figure it out pretty quickly. Conversion technologies is still a buzzword. It was a buzzword 5 years ago, but now it's here. 5 years ago at SWANA, when we talked about conversion technologies, it was talking about, you might as well have been talking about analyzing a flux capacitor or something like that, but now it's here, and we really need to figure it out quickly, because there are so many different waste streams for all of the different customer types across the country, and we need to, rather than just talking about it, we need to really start figuring out what works for whom.
And we were talking about political will a little while ago. Is it political will or is it PR? Because what about waste energy versus energy from waste?
No, political will is important. For example, Lanny yesterday gave a very nice presentation of the history of GRCDA SWANA. One of the driving forces was the political will to enact 1965 Solid Waste Act. Before that, the United States was full of all kinds of open dumps and burning dumps, and believe me, I've been involved in putting fires from open burning dumps, and it is terrible, terrible thing to do. Political will, passing that law, really was a game changer, and having somebody like Lanny step in and take over the program was a real game changer.
But I would argue political will in the future is going to come from PR. Political will, when you look at renewable energy incentives, right now it's solar and wind, because those are the pretty ones that everybody knows, and we haven't done a good enough job of promoting the available technologies or the available renewable energy sources that we are able to provide. People still look at it as dirty garbage, and if we can do a better job of promoting ourselves, then the political will follow.
If you really want to look at paradigm shift, let's go back to Europe again. Here you have modern countries who are imposing absolute bans on organics in landfills. No paper, no food waste, no yard waste. And if you're going to put organics in, if you're still mixing, they have $100 per ton surcharges. Now you want to talk about a paradigm shift in an industry, $100 a ton surcharge, not the tipping fee, $100 and the tipping fee will do that downstream within that market. So, you have that in Denmark, you have it of sorts in Germany, the UK is developing it right now. So, how are they replying? They're putting in large-scale composting, they're doing the UK enormous waste energy procurement, and they're bolstering recycling. So economics is always the driver. If here in the United States, in a lot of these urban areas, if we had electric rates where you could sell baseload electricity of 10 cents, 12 cents, you'd have everybody running out doing waste energy because you'd have a tipping fee of $20.
I think
and you would get a lot of interest, but waste management is very impacted by the cost of energy, whether it be transportation fuels or the wholesale cost into the grid.
Economics has always been a driver. The steel scrapyard has been around for decades. As a matter of fact, when scrap steel hit a price of $200 a ton, they had to impose new regulation on scrap yards not to buy manhole covers because people were going down the street stealing manhole covers and cashing them in. So it's always been a driver. Newspaper, when I started, was selling for between $5 and $15 a ton. Now it's $100 a ton. And plastics have gone up. So the reality is, aluminum's $1,000. It's $2,000 a ton, $1 a pound. We're living in America. It's economic driven, and what's happened is the technology's advanced to a point that the economics relative to the value of the material extracted, those lines of intersection now touch each other, and it's making more sense than it used to.
Am I hearing that what SWANA needs to do is broaden its programs in education and start to teach our membership marketeers and as analysts of their stream, and knowing that I want to get this out of this stream, now I've got to find a product, I've got to find a customer for it. It sounds like there's a whole spectrum of things with this shifting paradigm that requires the members to consider themselves even more now a resource manager and not a...
Exactly.
If we don't do it, the paper mills will, and they are doing it now.
Well, I mean, I'm stimulated by that example, Steve, that we own the trash. We ought to be able to do something with it that to our biggest economic benefit as well as the environment.
It's ours to lose.
And it's our trash.
And we'll lose it when somebody reclassifies it as a product. I mean, we don't own recyclables. Those aren't flow controlled. We lose trash.
Okay, but then we give them
components of trash when somebody reclassifies those as a feed source for a cement kiln or as a feed source for an incinerator.
But we'll give them the challenge of door to door. They can go door to door and pick it up then.
Well, but we don't own that, and I think the more that we put into the infrastructure where we assume that we have to be involved, the more at risk we place ourselves.
Absolutely.
Well, that leads to one of our audience questions, which goes, many states have enacted diversion or recycling goals or with mandates of 40, 50, even 75%. What does the panel think about the need for a national recycling goal or mandate?
I think the less mandates we have from the government, the better off we are.
It's our trash.
Well, I don't think it's something that should be done in the national level. You look at, some of the comments Sarah's made before. I'm originally from a town of 2,000. So, Seattle versus a town in central Wisconsin of 2,000, it's completely different. And it's not that people in rural areas don't want to do it, but as we've all seen with recycling, you have to make it easy. So for a lot of people, there just isn't enough of a base population to have those easy systems. And so they have to travel 20, 30 miles to a drop-off point. And the general population isn't going to do that.
I say government ought to stop making goals and start giving us some tools. The first tool that they gave us just recently is the change in definition of solid waste by the U.S. EPA, and we need other states to adopt that new Subtitle D definition, that you can take a combustible material, if you can remove a material from the solid waste stream that has combustion qualities equal to or better than the material it displaces, and you're recovering it for value, that material is no longer designated as a solid waste. What that means is that if you make an engineered fuel and you take it to a coal-fired boiler or cement kiln, that when that material leaves your facility, it is no longer regulated as a solid waste. That is a huge, huge paradigm change. And those are the kind of tools, those and more. That's what we need from this government, not a bunch of hollow goals.
How about a question on food waste? It's one of the largest portion of our waste stream with a very low recovery rate. And obviously there's some programs going in place for commercial. Is it feasible to really expect individual homeowners to separate their food waste? Is that practical? Does
that mean the elimination of the garbage grinder in the sink? That's where most of it's going. Now, if you look at we throw almost no organics out. We're empty nesters, you know. We don't throw any organics out. Whatever it is, it goes down through the food waste grinder.
Yeah, but you have to look at other things, not just food. Let's say you're talking about digester technology. It can take all sorts of organic streams. It can take contaminated cardboard, wet paper, even diapers in a lot of cases. So, you know, there's been a number of pilot studies, and I think it is reasonable to expect the general population to be able to have that third bin for organics. A lot of times you see in the studies it's a matter of almost forcing them to do so. And what's really worked in a number of areas is having weekly collection of the organics and bi-weekly or monthly collection of the residual waste. Because in the summer, if your organics are sitting in your garbage can for a month, you're going to very quickly start putting them in the right bin that gets picked up every week.
Lenny, I think you're absolutely right. The majority of food waste comes from the grocery store and from the food producers, not from the home.
And I think I was going to say, I think you know the commercial sources of food waste offers a large opportunity. Yep. We don't have the infrastructure in place for that. I had dinner with the compost guys last night, and of course their focus seems to be quite a bit on food waste and from commercial sources. If they get the restaurants to put a separate container out, and if you look at a fast food place, there's just an enormous amount of food waste goes out at the end of the day because they do not keep products 2 hours on the shelf. It's gone, and it goes in with the paper and the styrofoam and everything else. So a major field of opportunity there.
And I've been involved in this a bit. Even the companies that want to do it, you know, the restaurants, the grocery stores, for a nice PR or public image, they still are saying this is a business decision. It has to at least break even with our current waste disposal cost. Right. So technology and transportation solutions have to be made to make it at least break even with what they're currently paying.
Well, you're asking about residential waste separation, food waste separation. There's a small town called Baden-Baden in Germany, which is a very nice small city. And they have food waste collection. A few years ago, I visited the place to look at how they were doing it. They had 6 trucks running around the small city daily collecting food waste. So that's a lot of energy spent in collecting the food waste. And Germans are expected to be good rule-obeying people, and therefore, initially they thought they would get reasonably clean food waste for processing. Well, guess what? They found out that the Germans weren't really that rule-obeying either, and they ended up spending about €1.5 million to build a pre-treatment plant to remove knives, forks, scissors, coins, all kinds of metal pieces thrown in with the food waste. And after processing all this, they got the food waste out, and it was a very expensive program to do that. If the idea is to get energy from residential food waste, my suggestion is send it to a good bioreactor landfill, and you can get all the energy you want very easily from that.
Okay, we're moving on to another question.
I would disagree, though. Obviously, bioreactor landfills work well, but they are not specifically designed like a vessel to maximize your methane potential. So
yeah, but on a cost per cubic,
it's all a function of cost. With that pre-processing, that's a great opportunity for the people in this room. Is that pre-processing for the technology and the energy standpoint currently is very, very costly. So if you can crack that nut, you'll make a lot of money.
Okay, we're going to take another question from the audience. How do we engage the public when the cost of disposal for a year is less than the cost of cable TV in a month? How do we get them to care?
You don't. That's just not going to happen.
And, think about it, and, this just shows, I think, how successful our business has been, that we're able to send 2 trucks out to some house 52 times a year, And then that one truck has to pay additionally to dispose of what it picked up. And the average homeowner gets that service for the cost of cable for 1 month, or maybe a month and a half, depending what your market. I mean, we've really done a hell of a job of providing advanced solid waste management, whether it be on the collection or whether it be on the materials management end, for a relatively low cost to the
And
household.
fewer complaints than the cable business gets.
Right.
Well, they keep picking up my trash, and cable keeps taking channels away when they have contract disputes. But yesterday, Derek was talking about England's system, where they have a huge tax per ton on their waste infrastructure. And that just goes back to the national government, and they can use it, for anything that they want. It's not waste related. The reason being that they're trying to discourage landfilling.
Actually, I was in England when this law was enacted. The government at that time figured out that they couldn't raise the income tax rate, but if they put the tax on garbage, nobody would mind. That's exactly what happened. It was estimated that they would get 450 million pounds that year with the tax around 20 pounds per ton, and less than 10% of that went to the communities back. The rest of it went to Whitehall. So getting the governments to tax garbage is a very, very bad idea.
But weren't you a penny a ton guy one time on funding solid waste management research and stuff, a penny a ton?
50 cents a ton per year.
Okay.
We couldn't get that passed through the
I
Congress.
thought it was a penny a ton.
Well, that's for
That's the
ARF.
Applied Research Foundation.
Okay.
Penny a ton for all of you who want to participate.
That's right.
Couple of last questions before we end. We have talked about a lot of systems that do sound good for urban areas. We have apparently some people that live in rural areas in the audience, and they would like to know, what about cities that have less than 30,000 people, where recycling markets are over 100 miles away? How can they be competitive, and how can they have people separate and manage?
Well, one opportunity would be to move to a larger city. But if that's out of the question, there are some systems that could be brought into rural areas. When I think of a rural area, I think of agriculture, farming, and that really lends itself to anaerobic digestion. And there are some very successful small-scale anaerobic digesters where they digest the material, they extract gas, and they can raise that gas up to pipeline-quality gas. And they can use that gas in vehicles. And then last, they can take that material that remains, screen it, and put it back in the fields as compost. So, there are facilities that make good sense. When I look at the subsidy that photovoltaic gets, it's mind-boggling to me. And you asked about what government can do, and it's not goals. It's, why can't we get government to help subsidize facilities like anaerobic digesters in small communities, because that could really make a difference.
I live in a small community. I wish
About moving?
all the time. And there are a lot of other people that join me because we're seeing declining population bases, declining economic bases all the time, which makes the implementation of technologies all the more difficult. I wish I knew the answer to how to set up an infrastructure to be profitable and to be sustainable. Having a technology, a single solution, is not the answer. And for anybody to mandate, you must do it this way, is not the answer. But I also know that the rural areas are, in many cases, the targets of people that don't yet have proof that their system works. And sometimes we're so eager to be able to do the right thing or to invest in the next best thing and do some economic development at the same time. We might be a little bit gullible to some of those folks that are coming in trying to market the new technology. And, we might be more willing than we should be to throw the government dollars
Small-scale anaerobic digestion is very prevalent in Europe, on-farm digesting.
you can't-
I mean, there's hundreds and hundreds, if not thousands.
And I'm not necessarily saying it's all anaerobic digestion, it's some of the other things as well. And so what we need in the rural areas to develop sustainable infrastructures right now is some patience and some wisdom not to jump at every worm that's dangled on a hook in front of us.
I have to argue with you, though. Primarily, one of my main projects for the last 5 years has been a community manure digester. So I've been heavily involved. And I am sick to death of hearing about Germany, because Germany is not the U.S. If we were paying 50 cents a kilowatt hour, then wonderful. We could do all kinds of things. But that's not the reality. If we were paying $120 a ton for waste disposal, we could do all sorts of things. So that's not the reality in these really small communities. But there is a tremendous opportunity, because they do have paunch, they have slaughterhouses, they have tremendous other waste streams that we in solid waste don't typically see. So there is some ability to capitalize on that. But don't be so ready to compare us to Germany, because it's not what is here.
I think along those lines too, in smaller rural communities, that's where people are going to have to be the most creative, because there isn't, like Sarah was saying, there isn't a formula or a specific application for every single situation. I worked on a landfill in Kansas where they actually used a lot of waste hose from a nearby manufacturer, and they shredded it and used it as alternate daily cover. So the opportunities are there. You just have to really be looking for them.
You know,
Well,
I almost feel I have an unfair advantage arguing with someone who lost their voice. But you know, Sprachen Sie Deutsch was not in my dissertation. I can tell you that there's a company called Quasar, and I'm just citing them as just one example. I mean, they literally are so busy putting in anaerobic digesters in small communities that right now what they do is if you want to meet with them and have them look at your opportunity, they charge you for the feasibility study, because they just physically, they can't do it with their own people anymore, and they have a few hundred employees. They have to hire it out. So, you know, it is happening. It's not a matter of what can happen. It is happening. And certainly something, if you have a small community, you should pay attention to.
But
Well,
isn't a landfill an anaerobic digester also?
Well, but that's an anaerobic digester for larger populous areas, Lanny.
Now, my suggestion is we can help the rural communities by regionalization. So if you have a regional system, the costs can be allocated in a different way and collected. And there are opportunities to do other things. Each individual small community cannot handle things this way, but there is some strength in creating a regional system.
We have time for one last question. Since this is the 50th anniversary of SWANA, if each of the panelists could address what they think is going to happen in the next 50 years, and we're going to start with Olivia.
Oh gosh, the next 50 years. Sitting here today and meeting a lot of the people that I've had the opportunity to meet through our Young Professionals group and others here, I think one of the most exciting things about looking forward to the next 50 years is sort of what I started saying earlier. It's going to be changing faster now than it has been probably ever. So I think that we're really going to have to do everything that we can to stay out in front of the trends and be setting the trends so that other markets, like Steve was saying, aren't dictating how we do our jobs. So I think the young folks, as well as some of the more experienced folks, are really going to have to be creative and innovative and looking for new ways to address some of these problems that are changing every day.
Steve.
I have to tell you, I've been a member of SWANA for 32 years, and I have never seen a more exciting time in our industry. I mean, I get up every morning and I'm pumped. You know, I've got to tell you,
Like all of us.
You know, when you look at what's going on now, if you're not doing something cool in the solid waste industry, the world is passing you by. You know, when you look at rubbish trucks, you have hybrid rubbish trucks switching to natural gas. When you look at the landfill business, you've got GIS compaction equipment to get more compaction. You've got bioreactor landfills. You know, in the recycling business, you got near infrared, you got X-ray technology. There is so much going on that we should all be wearing sunglasses 24 hours a day. And so the bottom line is, I mean, when I look at what's happening in the next 50 years, I think the makeup of our membership of SWANA is going to become very different. It used to be there were 4 people in a rubbish truck and 1 person in the office, and it's now changing to 4 people in the office and 1 man on the truck. And so I think as an organization, we have to look at bringing in, you know, more of the academics, because there's going to be fewer and fewer people out on the street. Technology's changing. We need to stay on top of it. You know, our competitor isn't going to be NSWMA. It's going to be people like the paper mill if we don't take advantage of the situation. So I think it's very exciting. I think waste absolutely will be managed as a resource, and it is game changing, and we should embrace it.
Sarah.
In the rural areas, I think more people will take advantage of Steve's advice and move. And where that leaves us is that the gaps are going to get wider. The urban areas are going to continue moving forward and making progress, and the people who are left in the more rural areas are for a while going to continue to struggle, and sooner or later they're just going to get to the point where they kind of throw up their hands and say, we don't have the resources, we don't have the will, and they're going to get left behind.
Lanny.
50 years ago, every piece of equipment that was involved in the garbage business was modified from some other piece of equipment.
Yep.
Today, industry is developing equipment and systems specifically for our field. I think SWANA is situated exactly where it should be and has the opportunity to grow as we see this young professional group, which I'm very much impressed with the idea, and we will respond once we start to realize that we have to get busy in the market side. It's not going to be the same, but the paradigm shift is good for us. It is good for us. I think SWANA will continue to be a leader. I'm very proud of the organization.
John.
2 things. I think, you know, some people might not like this, but we're going to become more like Europe. Energy prices will go up. Our land base will shrink, and local governments aren't going to want to continue to pay for things. So you will see more EPR type legislation coming through. The second thing is, I think we have to take a look at what will the waste streams look like in the future, because it's not sustainable for North America to continue at our current consumption rate. As the rest of the world continues to develop, we won't have the same waste stream in 50 years that we do now.
NC.
I won't be here 50 years from now, so you can record this and...
His mother's alive and well. Don't listen to him.
50 years from now, we'll have landfills, and my prediction is about 50% of the world's waste will still continue to go to the landfills, but these will be much improved landfills. And the waste will continue to change, and if the governments are smart, they'll reduce the amount of regulation in handling waste and become more innovative, and the world will be a much better place.
Last, Jim.
You know, think about what we didn't talk about here this morning. We didn't really talk about protecting the environment, did we? Because in the last 50 years, we've pretty much conquered that. That's what we used to do. Oh, we have new landfill regulations. How are we going to treat leachate? How are we going to keep landfills from leaking? How are we going to clean the air for waste energy? We have made such strides in the core mission that we have of protecting the environment that we're now off to the next paradigm. We've shifted. And now we're looking at the diminishing landfill. We're doing something else with the waste, whether we're recycling it, minimizing it through packaging, or combusting it for energy. The landfill is diminishing. I think it's going to continue to diminish. And our efforts now, the discussion is on efficiency, driving costs down through technology. But we've, as an industry, have done a hell of a job of achieving, we're not 100% there. We're always still tweaking the environmental protection component, but we've pretty much done a hell of a job on that. And I think SWANA and our resources will now continue towards this efficiency move.
Thank you. I think we're out of time. There are a lot of other questions I didn't have a chance to get to, so I appreciate that. Clearly, this is a conversation that's going to have to be ongoing and continuing. I hope our game changers are going to be, you can pigeonhole them, but thank you for your attention, and let's have a round of applause for our panelists. Thank you.